FIORILLO Violin Caprice number 32 step-by-step tutorial, part 2, Bach to bow basics. So let's talk about that bow control challenge of this etude and how Fiorillo makes an illusion of two instruments playing, where one is playing the melody and then you have this accompanying voice. Now, even though I know it sounds very, very difficult and it seems very challenging, I want to encourage you to keep working on this etude and keep working toward being able to create that illusion on your instrument, because believe it or not, but you're going to use that a lot if you continue pursuing violin playing, because J.S. Bach's famous solo violin sonatas and partitas use that technique a lot to create polyphony on the violin, which is super cool. You probably noticed that very rarely you see violinists perform a whole concert or whole recital all by him or herself, right? Violin is the kind of instrument that most of the time needs an accompanying voice, another instrument. So what Fiorillo is doing in this etude is teaching you how to be a violinist who can actually play melody and accompany yourself, which is super, super cool. And that, I have to be honest, this is my favorite type of playing. I love making harmonies on the violin and using these tricks that I've learned in etudes like this. When I arrange, I do a lot of arranging, and a lot of times what I've learned from J.S. Bach and what I've practiced on etudes like Fiorillo helps me to arrange a lot of things for violin solo that otherwise I would need an accompanist for. And so anyway, this is a fantastic challenge because it will make you so much better as a violinist. So how do we now work on our bow control? Well, number one, make sure that you did practice according to part 1 of this tutorial. And if you haven't seen it, the link will be in the description. And make sure that you do watch it, because step 1 is to working on your double stops first, simplifying them like I showed you in that video, so that you are very confident in your double stop as far as intonation is concerned, and fingerings and positions and rhythms and so forth. That way you can direct your attention more toward your bow, right? So now that we suppose you are all ready, you got your double stops in the left hand under control, let's see how do we perform the etude now the way it's written in the book. So the first thing I want to do, I want to practice the very beginning of this etude, but just on the open strings. So we don't worry about the left hand, but we're just going to go play those strings that we're supposed to play in these first 3 beats, which will be right? Very simple. So it's much simpler on the open strings. Let's try it again. Right? Now let's try it with just the first 2 notes in without changing the bottom voice. How about we just play E flat and B flat, but alternate the strings just like we did. Let's try again. I can do it better. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So what you want to make sure that you don't interrupt the top voice, and that your bottom notes are separated equally, right? So they're very equal in length, and that also the breaks between the rest between the bottom voice notes are also equal, and that they all start pretty much the same. So you don't end up maybe like something like this. So what you want everything to be very even, both in the top voice and the bottom voice. And now if you are happy with how it comes out, now you can just add that 3rd finger in the middle. That's it. Not too bad, right? So what are the things that I'm striving to achieve when I practice something like this. For me, I will be open with you. The hardest part for me is to start these notes. So this double stop that starts the whole etude, right? I feel like it's the first impression of this etude for my listener. And my biggest challenge here is to make sure that I start on both strings at once, so that you hear both strings starting together at once. So what I know that a lot of times what my bow tends to do something like this, or you hear that? Or if I try too hard to start on two strings at once, yeah, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but yeah, those are actually the weird things that happen very often for me when I begin a double stop. And so this is what I'd like you to listen for, but I also want to give you a visual trick that helps a lot with that. So you know how you have spaces between the strings, right? So as you're holding your violin this way, and I want your eyes to be on your bow, and make sure that the bow is on both strings. But in order not to press too hard, what I do, I pretend that right here between D and A, in this case between D and A strings, there's one string that's right in the middle. So that imaginary string, I imagine that I play on that imaginary string that runs right in the middle between those two strings. And that really helps me to be more synchronized and start my sound more equally in both strings. Let's try it. Yep, works every time. So you can try it. I don't know, I guess everybody is different, but that trick really works for me every time. So this is basically how you can practice all of those instances of the double stops that we simplified last week. This week, this is what I would do. I would start converting them into playing them as it's written, right? By teaching your bow how to play a double stop, then slide to the top voice, then go right back to the double stop. I also highly recommend to practice with the metronome at this point, so that you want to make sure that you're counting everything correctly. And of course, remember, first week we separated all the double stops. Of course, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to make sure that we're playing correct bowings. This is very, very important here, because if you, even though no one is going to see you at the All State audition, but it's very easy to hear if you mess up the bowing, because sometimes you end up separating the note that's supposed to be held all through and so forth. So bow distribution is very important in this case, and that's why number one goal when you start working on your bow control here is to really work on your bowings and not to mess up any bowings. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this helps you with your stage 2 of practice of this etude. And for now, just have a great week and keep practicing.